Hello, Europe. G'day, guys. How are things in your part of the world? So I've got a few watch. Any questions, guys? No, it's a different time slot. I sort of shifted it 3 hours earlier to try and get a few people right through from Europe to parts of Asia and stuff like that, and um, try and lock in, trying a different time slot. Don't know whether it's going to be successful or not. That's a different question altogether. But hey, Tero, how's it going, mate? Yeah, I'm doing the Euro thing, sort of playing the thing, sort of with backgrounds and just making it look a bit, where I'm sort of looking like I'm in part of the damn thing. I'll get rid of it because it's probably annoying to everyone. Just having some fun. You got to have some fun now and then. Okay. Okay. Cancel that. Wrong one. Bring this up and get to none. Back to normal in that regard. Yes. Whoever's around, like and subscribe. A few people coming on. Probably people are just unaware. They weren't expecting this time slot. I understand. I do apologise. I probably should have promoted it a bit better. Good morning, Thomas. Yeah, it's taking a while to refresh on StreamYard as well, which is a bit annoying. That just popped on now, so I'll get that's the sort of delay with the actual server currently, unfortunately. So I've got the other thing. I don't know what's happening with StreamYard. I know that Bart and a few other people have had problems that they've been complaining and all that. So what's exactly causing it? Just noticed. Sort of getting a bit. Let me just try something. I'll try one of the other lights because somehow it's sort of reflecting really. So that's going to help. Nah, it's not making any bloody difference. You'll just have to put up with the sort of reflections off my blue blocking glasses. Yeah, oh well, can't do much about it. So, what's happening in your crazy part of the world? Anything interesting? Anything you want to ask me about? It's a sort of a general Q&A sort of, so anything goes, whether it's the virus or whether it's any other question. So anything you can think of. Had a question on the last 5 streams about reaction to cheese. You mentioned leaky gut, and in fact, without grains, the pain level has reduced greatly. Thank you. Not a problem. Look, as I said, fix the stomach, everything else flows from there. Everything usually, once you actually fix the stomach and you get the acidity levels right and you're actually clearing your small intestine properly, that means you're cleaning out the actual those bacteria. You're basically getting the right nutrition in there, and you're not getting basically the gluten. A lot of people, especially in many parts of Europe, do have gluten sensitivity of different levels. And sometimes in combinations they react. The older you get, that constant damage. Remember, you have to remember, go back in history, just 100 years ago, we didn't have a lot of wheat around. Wheat was at a premium. It was basically for special occasions combined and all that. And in many cases, even my father, when he was a young kid, like they would actually, his mother would cut a small, thin piece of the old traditional bread that they had in the mountains, which had like a tenth of the gluten, to give you an example. And, so it's the sort of wheat that they actually banned for commercial reasons. But that sort of thing. G'day, Heinrich. And his mother used to put lard on top and then put a piece of feta cheese, or goat's cheese or stuff like that, because they had goats as well. This is in the mountains of Greece, on the west coast. So that was his breakfast. Then, that was the only piece of bread that he actually had for the whole day. The rest of the day was, meats and vegetables and dairy, a lot of dairy in particular, because it's much cheaper to produce, much cheaper to basically provide nutrient calories and stuff like that. That's why Greeks still use as big, their consumption levels are very similar. As you've seen in my chats with Bart, where I showed the stats on consumption between the Swiss and the Greeks, very similar. They're atypical of the Mediterranean, the Greeks. They've been using, lamb and sheep milk. Lamb, obviously sheep, it's the same thing, and goat milk from antiquity. So, so it's not only there are regions in Greece that use A2 cows. That's true, especially in the northern part of Greece and to the northeast of Athens, an island area there's got a lot of cattle, but it's it's sort of more generally in that regard. So it's really the grains that are causing a lot of the problems for a lot of people. Now, because most Europeans, they should not be technically lactose intolerant. That's just bizarre, especially when you look at the ancestral sort of data and the genetic data that they've done throughout Europe. Most people, especially if you go from Central Europe or even the northern parts of Southern Europe to right through to the Scandinavian countries, there's high lactose persistent genes amongst the population. It's the predominant genes in Europe are pastoral. So, it just doesn't make sense that for thousands of years people have been consuming milk and now it becomes an issue. No, it's really that where they were using very little grain, because Europe has never had big grain producing areas. That's the reality, unlike North America and Australasia and places like that where there's more grain production. But Europe in general has never been a big grain producer. And even Ireland, it was more potatoes. So, and that was an import as well. It didn't help their health. But so generally speaking, the populations of Europe have been basically consuming very low gluten type diets for many thousands of years until after the Second World War, when a lot of the grains flooded in from North America as a consequence of the Second World War and the destruction of agriculture because of the war. People got they started enjoying them, started using them, and started gravitating more and more towards these. Nowadays it's on steroids in comparison to the past, but those were the driving factors. And so usually when you take out gluten, you take out wheat products, a lot of things resolve for a lot of people in terms of gut permeability. That's one thing. And then usually they don't react to, people no longer react to cheese. They no longer react to anything. Because at the end of the day, if your gut barrier has been damaged, you will get, it's the old story about, you get Gundry and all these other fucking queer idiots out there in the nutritional world that basically, put the finger at LPS, lipopolysaccharides, and they say, all this. But I'm saying, if you don't have the gut permeability, you're not going to get those bacteria inside. And the reality is you need the actual bacteria itself uses this LPS in order to generate an electrical charge, a negative charge on around its surface so it doesn't stick. So if you basically inhibit that electrical charge, what will happen? You'll get all these bacteria sticking to your gut walls and, potentially drilling into them and damaging them, creating bigger problems. This is the lunacy of these people. It's like the LDL. It's LDL. No, it's not LDL. It's oxidized LDL. But, they don't see the difference because they have this reductionist view, narrow-minded view in the way they view the world, and they don't understand the nuanced complexity of interactions. Those bacteria have that mechanism for a specific purpose, and that mechanism is there to basically allow them to move through, and even, and it's only the pathogenic ones which are a problem. The other ones that get through that are not pathogenic and use that electrical charge is actually good because it means they don't stick on your endothelial cells or your glycocalyx because they repel because of the negative charge. We've lived with pathogens for all our existence as a population. That's not the problem. It's when we start eating too many plants that basically, because if you and I've talked about in the past with Bart about sulfonation and MSM sulfur that I sort of tend to basically use to sulfonate my endothelial cells. Very important. But it doesn't only sulfonate them; it also sulfonates all the actual bacteria and all the organisms that live inside us, and actually prevents that stickiness, so things can flow through properly and move and do and interact and do their thing. When we basically create a very sticky environment because of glucose, and the other thing is a lot of the products, plant-based products, have a lot of oxalates. One thing that most people don't realize is oxalates literally strip away, basically, throughout the whole body, they reduce your sulfur levels, so it's a bad thing. It's like, Bart's been giving Thomas DeLauer a bit of stick about vitamin C, and he's right, because, excess vitamin C will end up turning into oxalate. You'll be stripping away a whole lot of sulfur. And I've talked with Bart about sulfur. It's really so important and critical. I understood that from my own cardiovascular experience, how to basically protect my endothelial cells. So this has been a thing that I've promoted, sulfonation of the body as one of those critical parts for years now, for probably about 8 years. I still beat that drum. No, but not many people are listening, unfortunately. It sort of goes in one ear out the other, but I'm not gonna stop, because I realize the importance of protecting the endothelial layers, but not only the endothelial, other parts of the body as well, from that stickiness, to create the right electrical sort of state within the body, in different parts of the body, in order for things not to stick, in the inappropriate way. Anyway, guys, I've had a bit of a rant on MSM, on sulfur, and stuff like that, like I usually do. But any other questions? Things that have been happening in Europe. We get half news down here. In Tasmania, we're sort of in lockdown, unfortunately. The powers that be have sort of decided that we can't leave the state. Nobody can come into the state of Tasmania, not even from the mainland, from other parts of Australia. And if you basically break quarantine, it's $16,000 fine or 6 months in jail. So I'm not going anywhere. I was planning for a holiday, but that's shelved now. It'd be an expensive holiday, I can tell you. So pretty much, we've, look, in order to protect the vulnerable groups from this virus, like older people that have got pre-existing conditions, or even younger people that have got pre-existing conditions, they seem to be the most vulnerable. I'm not against, initially I wasn't against some of these strategies, but at the same time I realized I actually had some brain thoughts. I actually use my brain. Unfortunately, politicians don't. And I thought about, there must be a better way. And I actually said to one of the guys at work, I said, well, there's a third way other than herd immunity, which kills a lot of people, or basically, closing down the the whole society and all that. The other way is to basically let's quarantine all those susceptible groups. So you basically, the older people and those people that are unhealthy and all that, you quarantine them, and you put some process in place where you test them and quarantine them, and basically get them out of the out of the general public in that regard, and then allow the virus to go through the general public to get herd immunity. That you may get a few here and there that get sick, end up in hospital, but that's not going to tax the system, the medical system, too much. Once you've got the herd immunity, hopefully within a couple of 6 months to 8 months and all that, you've actually got some vaccines, some drugs and all that, which you can use to help protect these people, so you can allow them to come back into the community, rather than actually closing down the whole society, collapsing a whole lot of small businesses and a lot of people's people that have worked their whole lives and all that. There are better solutions, and I think unfortunately current politicians are not thinking about these solutions. They've got their head in the sand, they're just being reactive, and they're not thinking about other things. The death rate is quite high in Italy. It's because of old people, and the problem is a lot of the people that came back from the northern. They came back, because remember, northern Italy is the one that's been hit the most. Now, what do you have in northern Italy? Most of the businesses are in northern Italy. Most of the big trading businesses are in northern Italy, like Milan and places like that. Who do you think they trade with? China. Different parts like that. They go to China, buy cheap commodities. In the past, they used to get cheap products from southern Italy, and they used to sell them. You used to have around in southern Italy, you even had, the spaghetti westerns and all that, when the Italian lira was quite competitive and cheap in the old days, the pre-Euro days. And so, what's actually happened now is that for cheap inputs, they no longer go to southern Italy, they go to China, they go to other parts of Asia. And so most of the manufacturing hubs in northern Italy trade between that part of the world. So they're more vulnerable to bring back the virus. So the mistake was that the Italian authorities didn't take it serious from the beginning, quarantine those people as they were coming back from China, like the Australian government actually quarantined a whole lot of people from the Wuhan province at Christmas Island for 2 weeks, in order to guarantee that they didn't have any illness, and then release them into the public. That's one reason why the Australian society has had less, outbreaks, where a lot of other countries were very blasé about it, especially the American government. Now they're reacting in bizarre ways, so they still haven't got their act together completely. And in Europe, they were basically thinking about all sorts of scenarios. Even Britain was actually thinking recently about using herd immunity, disregarding that potentially. I'll just allow that to show, Thomas. That was just basically locked because there's nobody basically moderating. Oh, well, I need to find somebody in Europe to moderate for me. So what's actually happened is that Italy just didn't take it serious in the beginning, and now a lot of the people are in that older age bracket. See, remember, you have to remember, like Okinawa, parts of northern Italy, have longevity. They live for many years, but once you're in that really old age bracket, you are slightly more vulnerable. That's the reality. So, well, I wouldn't actually say, the reality is if you live in part of the world that you've never been exposed to something, you're more vulnerable. It's a bit like the plagues and all that, and that it came from Asia in the past that devastated Europe, because their bodies had never developed immunity to them. So it's the same thing that happened to parts of the Americas, where Central America, where there were more grain populations living off grain and stuff like that, there was decimation of their ruling class, decimation of a large part of their society. Where the North American Plain Indians, on the other hand, they had losses as well, deaths from diseases, European and Asiatic diseases that had come in, but their societies did not collapse. So their animal-based diets actually were quite protective for them. So even though this was completely new to their system, it actually shows that an animal-based diet can be protective for people's health. So, keep that in mind. Nutrient density, high-quality animal foods do provide, a good, robust immune system and immune health. I mean, if people eat an animal-based diet, they will tend to get things like, about, anywhere between 1,000, 2,000 IUs of vitamin D, very important for respiratory infections, let alone, I mean, vitamin D plays other roles. 1,000, I think it's 1,000 different biochemical processes. And that has to do, it actually provides like a template for your DNA. It actually reads and actually confirms with the DNA when transcription factors are actually, when things are produced, all these proteins, my little nanomotors or machinery that actually that get transcripted. So, plays a critical role. And, and if you're not, and also your T killer cells require vitamin D anyway. They're literally coated with vitamin D3 receptors. So it's very important in that regard. An animal-based diet tends to be, if you're eating any sort of high-quality animal foods, you will get higher levels of vitamin D3 from the diet, which is really important. Where most people that don't tend to not to. Now, why hasn't that come up in my StreamYard thing? That's a bit strange. One of the actual comments that Thomas actually put up hasn't come up in the StreamYard. No, let me just try to go to the banner, come back. Has it refreshed? Nope, it hasn't. How annoying. I'll just read it out. The US is a shit, so everyone is hoarding toilet paper, and there is plenty of meat on the shelves. Priorities are really screwed up. Yeah, you're right, Thomas. They are completely, loony. The sort of things that, what can you say? It's really unfortunate in that regard. The reality is, I mean, I've heard a number of things on the web. It's there's a lot of different sort of on both extremes. There's that people are talking about. There's a lot of nonsense and a lot of speculation, and I don't speculate. The reality is that is the actual test foolproof? No, because it's very early, and they're only basically looking at fragments and certain protein markers that indicate that you have or you don't. And there can be some like you may get tested and then go and get tested a week after and actually get a negative first and then get a positive. There are problems with the test, but that's because we've speeded out putting all this stuff out without really testing it properly and all that. And so you're not going to get the quality you would get after months of, testing this stuff. And a lot of people are, making all these conspiracy claims why these tests are not working properly. Well, it takes time to develop products. I mean, I sort of, even in my field, spatial science, developing products takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. People seem to forget that. So there is that side of thing as well that people sort of forget. Minority groups in the UK infected elderly people purposely. Very, very disturbing. Yeah, well, if that's happening, it is disturbing. I mean, there's going to be wackos in every sort of community that are going to do wacky things, and that's just unfortunate. The only thing I can say is try to protect your family, try to get them to basically, gargle. Really important to sort of keep the sort of the bacterial infection type load. Try to breathe with your nose, which is what I do when I actually walk. I sort of focus on it. I mean, doing sort of mindful things and stuff like that, and breathing exercise. I've sort of learned myself to basically breathe with my nose, so you're not taking in, from the air that's circulating, especially in winter. It's actually worse because droplets of infectious material will actually can actually stay in droplets of water, where in summer from the heat they usually dry out, so it's less of a problem. So keep that in mind. Yeah, there are really crazy people out there doing really bizarre things. I'm looking over there because things are not popping up over here properly, so I need to basically keep an eye that I'm not missing out on anything. So I'll just read it out. If it doesn't come across, I'll read it out. If it does, I'll put it up as per normal. It's really important that people understand vitamin D. So you're looking at if you're out in the sun in normal summertime, you would get, in terms of units, so you got the milligrams, which is, so think about 40 times, or you can take the international units and divide them by 40 and you'll get your milligrams. Okay, so if you're looking at 4,000 IUs, international units, you're looking at 100 milligrams, so divided by 40. So that's how you work that out. Now usually the body will, if you're not getting it from the sun, normally you would get basically in sort of around about 2,000 IUs from a very good carnivorous diet, especially if it's got dairy components to it as well. If it doesn't, it's probably 1,000. If it's got dairy components, like the sort of style that I do, then you're going to have that higher international units. Now, in terms of basically protection, you need between 4,000 to 6,000. I wouldn't go over 6,000. It's like anything, there's a sweet spot for vitamin D, a sweet spot for everything, and you don't want to go too high, you don't want to go too low. So consider, if you're on a animal-based diet that excludes dairy, you'll be at around 1,000. So you'll probably need another 3,000 IUs, or 75 milligrams. If you're basically on just, including dairy, you'll be 2,000. So you'll only need an extra 2,000. So need to double, and that's in winter. Once you hit summer, just get out in the sun, enjoy the sun, because it's so therapeutic. And you get additional benefits from the sun. It's not only vitamin D, it's cholesterol, sulfur, and all sorts of things that are beneficial, and also the quality of certain homeostasis is much better as well, in terms of these things. So it's really important to enjoy the sun when you can. It will be protective. That's why in winter we have most respiratory infections. And this basically does weaken the immune system, causing respiratory infections. Now, I did mention last time in one of my about the ACE2 receptor. Now, in terms of its upregulation, it's not a problem unless your vitamin D and vitamin A retinol are low. Now, Chris Kress has been going out there saying that vitamin D and vitamin A high doses are going to actually push very high your ACE2 receptor. Now, excessive amounts, yes, and excessive amounts of both those nutrients are probably not a good idea to be supplementing in that regard. What we're talking about is normal levels, and normal levels will have very marginal effect. It's because this pathway, this enzymatic pathway, is used by the virus, but it's also used by these fat-soluble vitamins as well. So it's not harmful. It's actually beneficial in many ways. It's just that basically the virus has the ability to, let's say, hijack this pathway. But remember, also going through the lymphatic system, remember, carnitine suppresses viruses through the lymphatic system. So that's another way we can use carnitine, or our animal-based diet that we use, to basically inhibit. So you may want to supplement a bit. I tend to not want to supplement in normal times. I tend to get the thing from the diet. But, I'm using currently choline. And the reason why I'm using choline rather than getting it from eggs is because it's a problem trying to get eggs at the moment, because everybody's bloody crazy in the supermarkets and you can't find eggs, which is really annoying. So I've got the choline supplement as a fallback. So when I'm running low on eggs, I use choline. What can you do? It's just bloody crazy. Taurine I'll use all my life. That's a different thing. Even though I would prefer getting it mostly from the diet, I don't use a large amounts, but I still use some because, choline synthesis in our body drops. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things. And, sulfur, because we just don't, our soils are much sulfur poor, unfortunately, which is a reality. Now, the problem with supplements, like with all the refined stuff, it's high in deuterium. I'm willing to pay the cost of more neutrons, more deuterium in my body, because I can offset it with high fat. And that's what I do. I have fats like fish, like pork, which are much lower in deuterium, even compared to tallow. Tallow is higher in deuterium than pork fat. So I tend to gravitate towards those sort of foods, fish and pork. Plus, I still have tallow. I buy tallow and I use tallow, but I tend to actually put a component in there to offset those other things. So it's all about balancing, staying within the 120 parts per million of deuterium. So that's your focus point. And I mean, even protein's got about 134 parts per million. It's over the 130 mark. So what do? Get rid of all protein? You'll die. It's a matter of basically, using the fats, which tend to be at that lower part, like 150, anywhere from 102 to 115. And so that's why I usually say 1 part per 1 part. So 1 part fat to 1 part. So 1 gram fat, 1 gram protein. Why? Because you balance out your deuterium levels within that sweet spot. So if you average out the two, you actually fall within that sweet spot, and that's the whole idea. The trick behind it. Combining fats and proteins in an appropriate way to get those levels. I mean, as I said, I'm going to do a series of on melanopsin, on light, magnetism, and deuterium and water. So there will be a series. I'm still working on it. There's a lot of stuff and material to show and stuff like that. So it takes time, and I do a full-time job, so it will happen over a certain extended period. Unfortunately, it's just the reality of things. I can't hurry things up. I do this for free. It's a matter of time and all that. I did get back recently some of the chats that I had in the past about methane and some of the populations, tribal population chats that I had with Bart, that he didn't get around basically editing them. So he's given me back the video, so I'm going to edit them, and eventually when they do get edited, they will get released. So expect those as well, that information as well. So, we're getting there slowly but surely. It's like in everything, you can't cover everything. It's very important. I use MSM. Really, really good as well. It's a sulfur, magnesium type combination, which is a really good thing. I mean, I use Epsom salts, and I occasionally have, baths in Epsom salts. Really good. I highly recommend them. Really good for the skin, really good for the body in general. To sulfonate. Sulfur is really important, and our soils are very depleted in sulfur. So, and it's so important to prevent the stickiness. And even when we're talking about advanced glycation in products, carbohydrates are the real killers in terms of really reducing sulfur. This is why you get all these advanced glycation in products. This is why you get that stickiness in your body. This is why when you get older, you get stiff. You get basically, all these, your proteins don't work properly. They get damaged. It's because of lack of sulfur. Very important. I mean, our animal-based diet tends to be rich in sulfur amino acids. So, but at the same time, it's not as rich as it used to be. And that's the downside, So there's a lot of factors. I mean, Probably one other thing that I found interesting recently, people were talking about the 5G making people with corona a bit more susceptible. It's speculation on their part, but there's probably some truth in that. It's sort of an indirect truth, and it doesn't. It's not 5G only. It's all EMFs of that sort of wavelength and all that. Even though I mean, you've probably seen my video, a number of you, that I did with Bart on that. Heat shock proteins are not affected. There's no radiation effects. There's no ionization. There's all these other things, damage to the DNA and all that. None of that happens. That's just BS. And I showed the Japanese studies and a number of other things to explain that when I did one on with Hellman, and I mean, he's got his own opinions, but he's wrong about that side of thing. Where he's right about the EMFs and stuff like that, but he doesn't know why. It's because basically what EMFs do is they deplete basically in the actual mitochondria itself, the NAD plus. That's the whole thing. You get that cycle of NAD plus to NADH, and basically, you need that to, because there's an electron doning there effect, but it basically plays a critical role in energy production. So what happens is when you bleed through with these sort of emissions, you bleed through your NAD plus, you reduce the efficiency of the mitochondria. That's the problem. Now, you can supplement it. I mean, I use, as you know, vitamin B. Pork is high in B3, vitamin B3, which is basically the precursor to NAD+. So it goes through that and eventually gets converted to NAD+. You can use nicotinic acid, which is what I use. But primarily my focus wasn't on mitochondrial or, that sort of side of things. It was more focused on cardiovascular health and, not using statins and stuff like that. But, I've been investigating, nicotinic acid and stuff like that, and niacin and different things like that, and their effects on NAD+. So, that's another important thing that, we can use to basically sort of protect ourselves in that regard. So, foods high in vitamin B3, really good in this sort of environment. I mean, you could supplement. You could get NR. I think it's called NR plus or something like that nowadays, or get NMN, or get nicotinic acid like I do, which I give myself flushes and sort of bit of tingling. Always with food. It is basically pharmacist grade. That means you have to get it from a pharmacist, and you have to give them a reason. In Australia, they won't give it to you over the counter. So it's always, I get all these questions. I have to say, look, I've got a pre-existing condition. So that's how I get it. So I don't know in different jurisdictions, so don't ask me. Your next best option is getting one of these other supplements that can actually increase your NAD plus levels, which not only will help with longevity, extending your life by potentially, if you're a rat, by 30%. Since you're a human, I have no idea because we've never done any studies on humans with NAD plus precursors. So can't really tell you, but it is an effective solution to EMF issues. So that's an option. It'll be part of that series that I'll be talking about. I'll go into greater detail, but yeah. So any other questions, guys? I know there's very few of you. I don't know why. Maybe everybody's expecting a different time slot, which is normally it's about, the UK's, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Probably people are still asleep from a hard night out, more than likely. And, I was hoping a few of them would get up now with the coronavirus. I wouldn't be going out. They'd be at home and sort of wake up early. But nah, or probably on their iPads or, iPhones or whatever all night and sort of burning the midnight oil. Better drink my milk, raw milk. So creamy. That's what I usually have at night. It's 7:40 here p.m. So that's my last. I've already had a big steak. A roast. Had a steak yesterday, but I had a roast today. So it was part of a roast that I had earlier in the week, and I just put in the fridge. So I warmed it up, just prior to this, about an hour prior to starting this. So that was really enjoyable. There's beef roast. I've got a lamb in there. Actually, I've got 2 bits of lamb roast, 3 bits of lamb roast. So probably next week I'll probably try and get that sorted. 5G set to disrupt oxygen, hemoglobin binding. Yep, yeah. It does more than that as well. So it affects the NAD plus as well pathway. Also with water production and synthesis, because remember, your inner mitochondria, what's their role? The mitochondria are not really interested in basically, ATP synthase. All that is basically, what do you think? It's a byproduct. It's their shit. We use their shit for energy. Their purpose in life is to basically create metabolic water. That's how we hydrate ourselves. The quality of fat that we give them, we create better water. This is where the problem with light, those light frequencies that are disrupting the proper functioning of that. Now, in the daytime, it's less of a problem. It's usually at night when you're eating at night, which becomes a bigger problem. So, my sort of solution is shift your time, your eating window in the daytime when there's light out. You should be eating in light anyway. So, because of the blue frequencies is the actual problem and disturbing that whole homeostasis and production. So keep that in mind. Yeah, look, this isn't for the US. That's tomorrow. So this is for Eurasia, and for Tero, for instance, in Finland, it's in his morning, Saturday morning, he's getting up probably after maybe a heavy drinking night. I don't know, or I don't know. Is Finland in lockdown at the moment? What's happening in your neck of the woods? You guys in lockdown, or are you in Finland yet, Tero, or is it limited in some areas and not others? I know in parts of Estonia, the guy that does all the fasting videos, he's somebody told me that he's in lockdown at the moment. I don't know whether he's got corona or nothing. That's another thing. Remember, I thought that I may have corona. I don't have it. Basically, the American that thought, the US citizen that actually thought that he had it, basically came back negative, which was good. That means my mate didn't get it off him, and so couldn't have passed it on to me. So, okay, so yeah, so you guys are in lockdown. Yeah, we're in lockdown as well. Yeah, it's can't go anywhere. My holidays are shelved to Southeast Asia, so Bali's off. Anyway, so still haven't been able to communicate with Nick, mate of mine over in Bali, find out whether he's there or what's exactly happening. He's an American. He out of Hawaii. He basically lives in Southeast Asia, cruises around surfing. So, well, that's his gig. He enjoys life. Good on him. I need 6 more years to retire to start enjoying it as well like that. Well, that's where I'll be retiring, Southeast Asia. So in 6 years' time, it'll be from Bali, so I'll be transmitting from there. Yeah, look, I know. Look, my brother-in-law, because he was down here from a younger sister's brother, my brother-in-law from a younger sister, and he went back just before they closed everything down. And yeah, he was sort of chatting with us and me and my sister and saying, look, don't know what the tourism season is going to be like this year. It's going to be if it's bad enough that with all the crisis they've had and all the, so it's going to be really hard for them this year, unfortunately. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, you'll be stuck. You won't be able to get any, because going to I do the same. I go in winter, because summer here is not too bad. We get a pretty good summer, but I also in winter, I tend to go to Southeast Asia to get more vitamin D. And I've actually noticed when I do travel in the middle of winter and come back and all that, I sort of replenish my levels of vitamin D naturally. I don't supplement. And, I rarely get a cold or anything, which was really good. But unfortunately, yeah, it's going to be hard for tourism. It's the same thing in Australia. I mean, if you look at Queensland, which is our major tourist destination in Australia, it's just one industry, one business after another being decimated. It's bad, and even Southeast Asia, a lot of businesses are really struggling because you've got the China tourism, you've got the Australasian tourism, and then to a less, well, not to a lesser, probably 40% of their tourism comes from sort of China. 30% of their tourism comes from Australasia, and then about the other 30 plus comes from Europe and North America to Southeast Asia. So, they were already hit before the virus hit because of the China and the Australasian tourism drying up. So they dropped already nearly, 2/3 of their tourism dropped off. And now, now with Europe and North America tightening things, the things are really getting bad over there. And I've got friends over there and, it's not looking good. They're struggling. A lot of people are some people have gone back to their sort of hometowns away from leaving Bali or gone to other parts. And it's the same thing in a mate of mine that's down here. His partner's Thai and she can't go back and she wants to go back. She's got a son over there. So he's trapped. They are trapped in Australia. They can't get away. So they're going to end up going through the winter here. They're not going to be able to get away. So it's really problematic. And luckily he's just got his doctor to basically get him the vaccine for pneumonia because he's in that old age bracket with pre-existing conditions. So he's had a heart condition in the past. So, yeah. But yes, it's only recently he's starting to listen to me a bit, not a tiny bit, so he still eats a bit of, regular sort of crap. So I'm just hoping he makes it because, it's not looking that good. If he's, but luckily he listened to me and he's trying to get that vaccination because it won't be the virus that'll kill you. It's the pneumonia that you'll get from a weakened. So you've got pre-existing conditions. The virus weakens your immune system even further. People tend to nowadays, because they're in city slickers, putting cream on their hands, on their face, they tend to have a much lower vitamin D status. So they're more vulnerable. So, yeah. So unfortunately, more people will die in that through this period, unfortunately. I mean, at least Europe and the Northern Hemisphere now are going towards summer. So that's going to be a benefit. That will curtail as vitamin D levels go up. It should help curtail more, those excessive levels of death at the moment. It's sort of, because a lot of people say, well, we weren't really, this is the other conspiracy thing. We weren't that sick through winter, or we had the winter flu and now nobody's sick. Yeah, but people don't realize, through that winter flu and through that, you basically had a lot of attack by that period of flu in that middle part of the winter on your lungs. So you're already compromised. And so your status continues to decline in terms of vitamin D for most of the population. So by the time summer hits, you're in spring, and spring is the time when your vitamin D levels are at the beginning of spring at the lowest. So you're at the most vulnerable at that point. And that's what these people don't understand. They don't get it, you know. That's why people are more vulnerable. In China, there were other factors as well. You had in Wuhan province, you had 5G, which was an issue in terms of energy production. So because, you need energy to basically heal yourself, to basically clear things out and all that. So it's an indirect, but it has some effect as well. The other part is that, China in those parts, very industrial, a lot of smog and a lot of, the lack of clean air and not enough sun rays getting to the surface. So you don't even have a good vitamin D status like the Chinese traditionally would have had as farmers. And so that's a reduced amount as well. So you've got all these factors that are at play. And on top of that, smoking, high rates of smoking. So they tend to compromise their immune system a bit more. Then you've got more cadmium in that soot that over those cities, which also has an effect on, compromising your lungs as well. So all these confounding factors, that's why they had these higher rates, even amongst people which were much younger, where in other parts of the world it's been much more the more older, the more people with more underlying conditions. That's played a bigger role in that regard. G'day, Bo. And how you just woke up. Good for you. As I said, most of UK people would be waking up now because it's about nearly 9 o'clock. Yeah, look. I thought with all the lockups around the place, you guys would basically, but I should have thought they're probably on their iPods and their iPhones and whatever else, and people are sort of burning the midnight oil a bit, and so getting up later. So I tried a different time slot for Europe. So normally I do one at the beginning of every month, and I will do my regular monthly one that will come up. So do expect that to happen. This was just an impromptu one. I decided, because I hadn't done anything for this part of the world, specifically for this part of the world, and I decided to do it a bit earlier to basically give time for people that are in, parts of the Asia as well. So that was the key thing. What was that? Oh, yeah. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, you had a reason. Yeah, fair enough. No need to explain. I'm just talking shit. Ignore what I said. But generally, I was expecting more viewers. I usually get more viewers when I hit Europe, but it's just the way it is. God damn. You only slept 3 hours, woman. Bloody hell. Yep. I'd be still seeing things. I'm drinking my milk, it's nearly 8 o'clock here in the evening. So I'm sort of getting myself ready for my melatonin, increasing my melatonin, my blue blocking glasses. And getting myself ready to tuck myself in a couple of hours. Yes. So, there are other compounding factors which can drive illness and disease and stuff like that. But as I said, guys, vitamin D, most important out of everything in terms of respiratory infections. So focus on that. Get your 4,000 IUs, 100 milligrams, and keep the animal products up in your diet. Any other questions, guys? And a bit of cream that actually stuck in the back of my throat for whatever reason. Annoying. So any specific, anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be. it's taking a bit of time. And I can see you've put a question there, but I can't put it up yet because it's taking a bit of time. There's a bit of a delay factor. I don't know why. It's just annoying. A number of people, even Bart's been telling me the StreamYard's been, hasn't been as efficient as it's been in the past. I think more people are using it, and they haven't really upgraded their services, so there's a bigger delay in, so what can you do? So you hope to go to the farmers markets. I need my cheese. Yeah, I understand. Just hope it's still open. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, I did have some brie today, so so I've hogged out on a bit of brie in that regard. So that was enjoyable. Getting my MK4. So I mean, these are the sort of things. As I said, we don't want to be overloading on supplements unless we necessarily have to. It's like taurine synthesis goes down. Certain things, but try to keep it to a minimum, because too many supplements are refined. They've got high deuterium levels, not good for your mitochondria. At the end of the day, your mitochondrial efficiency is going to play a much bigger role in healing internally and fighting disease. So remember that. That's where the focus has to be, on animal products, not on supplements. But in some times, we can't afford to take a risk. So I usually say, well, even to a mate of mine today, I said, well, just get yourself a vitamin D3. You've got two options. You can go either for the liposomal form, which basically, a phosphatidylcholine sort of encapsulation. So you can either go for that, or you can go for one which uses bovine sort of a glycerin or whatever, the gelatin, bovine gelatin sort of coating with inside. They've got extra virgin olive oil, so no seed oils. So it's a better type of vitamin D3, because it's basically the fat soluble component is coming from MUFA, monounsaturated fat, from extra virgin olive oil, so it's much safer as a vitamin D3 supplement. So just Google. There are different companies that the majority of them are seed oil based. You don't want that shit. Canola, soy, and shit like that. So just Google extra virgin olive oil D3, and you will get supplements that actually provide that. And then it's up to you, your price point or whatever, which one you want to take. Read the other ingredients, and if you're fine with that, go for that. So it's just for northern hemisphere. It's really for the next 3 months, because your vitamin D status has come quite low, and it usually through spring you're the most vulnerable. That's why people are so vulnerable in Europe and parts of Asia in the northern hemisphere, because of their lower vitamin D status. So keep that in mind. Been taking good, running out, so get a good one while I can. Yep, exactly. I got mine online. It's just one of those things. Yeah, it's crazy. You can't find anything. So I had to go each time I want to get something from the supermarket. I'm there the first person nearly out the crack of dawn. That's the only way. And if I'm late at work, I usually sort of call and send a message to my manager. I'll be in late. So I'm going to the supermarket and go back home to drop things off. Fucking crazy, So what can you do? It's just. But anyway, it works pretty flexible, so I can work later, and as long as I'm getting stuff done, so I work in a very flexible environment, so it's not an issue. They probably need me more than I need them, but anyway, that's a different point. Yeah, so really in that regard, sort of focus on these sort of things. Keep yourself healthy, keep yourself away from indiscretions. Probably this is not the best time for indiscretions, so Bart's not around, I should say. No pizza. You'll kill me if he hears that. So yeah, so basically, we need to be mindful of that we're a bit more vulnerable, especially you guys in the northern hemisphere because of your low levels. You guys are going to be aware of this, and you're going to be a bit more proactive. But the important thing is get the message out to your family and friends. Try to get it as wide as possible because share my videos. That's the way you help me. I help you. It's a sort of a quid quo. Yeah, you know what I mean. I do something for you guys. You do something for me, in a sense. So, and it's just a sort of a nice, you do something nice for me. I do something nice for you. Free information. So, in that regard, I don't know the right word in English, but what do you think of the first milk? Colostrum. Yeah. Have you tasted? No, I've never tasted colostrum. It is high in in sort of things like stem cells, and it's in high in a number of things which are really important for the development of a cow or a child or whatever. I know that people use it for purposes of healing themselves from really bad ailments. When you've got really bad conditions, it can be very helpful. It's expensive. So, in that regard, but you definitely want to get it from a good source. So that's where your focus should be. Yeah, and look, I haven't really looked into how to source it, so I couldn't actually tell you who the best suppliers are in the world or where to get it. But you're definitely looking at something which is grass-fed, grass-finished, pastured, organic. There's no glyphosate or any other crap in it, so keep that in mind. Yeah, so that's where you focus. If you're going to cough up money, and you would only use it for those sort of purposes. Look, yeah, that's another thing. I mean, if you can't get raw milk, getting colostrum, from a good reputable supplier is another option. And I wouldn't go overboard. I mean, having small amounts, like strategic points, like if you're doing a sort of a slightly prolonged fast and then a refeed, you could add at that point, so you add additional benefit to that rebuild in that regard. So use it in that way. So if you're going to fork out the money, you might as well use it in a strategic way as you're coming off autophagy and rebuild, that it's strategically giving that body additional nutrients and things that it can actually use to build even better tissue, and do more repair than what normal refeeds would do. So that's, the nutrition plays a big role on refeeds. Craziest things that some people do sometimes, they do a long fast and then they eat shit. They spike their insulin, one thing, which isn't very healthy because they're so sensitive, it over exaggerates. That's one thing they do wrong. Then they basically eat and especially the last thing you want to do is consume. And this is really important for people that are doing weightlifting and stuff like that. If you do a fast, do not consume whey. No, has double the insulin effect that glucose has. So you can imagine what sort of spike you're going to get from it, unless you're using it in hypertrophy training in a certain strategic moment, like half an hour before, and in the afternoon. You don't want to do it in the morning. In the morning, you also always should train on an empty stomach, so because cortisol's high. So, when cortisol comes down at about 11 o'clock, 11-ish, 10:30, 11-ish, that's, in the afternoon is when you want to do those sort of combinations in that regard. Jenny, thoughts on applying liquid D3. It depends on the brand. I don't know enough about it. I know that some are really absorb well through the skin, some don't. So if it's something that I've always said to people, two things: that either use of D3, a liquid form, and I don't recommend any brands, because I don't use it myself, so I don't really know enough. But that's one thing that I can't recommend. The other one for malabsorption issues when people have is liposomal. So, Aurora Nutrascience on iHerb, they have a liposomal D3, and you can actually use one of those. Use not the 9,000, that's too high. Use a 3,000 IU one. It's cheaper. It is the expensive type, but that's another one to get past the gut barrier and get into your bloodstream and all that without big issues when you've got issues with your stomach or stuff like that, and you're still sort of healing in that regard. So that's one option. The one on the skin, obviously the one applying it on the skin, the absorption rate depends on the quality of the product. I've heard it does vary. So what the actual manufacturer says and what really gets in isn't always necessarily the same. So you may have to basically get yourself tested to see what sort of resulting effect you have from the product. So just don't take it on what the brand says. Test to confirm in that regard. So hope that helped. Any other questions, guys? Anything, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be any specific. That's nice. Got to try and get it down before a certain amount of time. You're welcome. Still hasn't come through. Still waiting. Come on, come through. Damn it. Jenny just thanked me. But yes, it's sort of it's like torture, like waterboarding for me, because I have to wait for these things to pop through so I can bring them up on screen. So you're welcome. Oops. You're welcome, mate. Yeah, it's a bit like that. That was actually faster. It came through just quite quick, Bo. You must have this that special touch. Going to listen to the entire stream later. That's okay. You go and get your rest. You need your sleep. That's important. 3 hours is just not enough. Focus on your sleep. I don't take it personally. I care about people's health. And that's important. You watch it later. That's fine. The most important thing is you get proper sleep. Go and sleep if you have to. But remember, eat in the daytime. Do not eat at night. Not a good thing, especially when you've got these irregular circadian time sort of effects. So the ApoE4 saturated fat danger. Nah, there's no danger. That's just BS. Absolutely nothing. Primitive humans were basically ApoE4s. So are the chimps. So we're designed to basically eat an animal-based diet based on that. That's not the issue. The issue is when you throw in carbs. People with an ApoE4 are less capable in terms of clearance. All has to do with clearance. Has to do also with the HDL receptor and its interaction with ApoE4. Because actually there's a receptor on the actual HDL itself. So with the chylomicrons, it's interaction. So I'm going to do a video on that. I know I've promised to do to explain it in a more detailed way, and going right back 3 million years to explain all the sort of evolutionary stuff. Because there's a lot of people are talking out there that because we got on carbs, agriculture that our alleles changed. Well, there's some truth in that, but it's not exactly that purpose, because it actually happened 200,000 years ago. And the ApoE2, 80,000 years ago, pre-agriculture. There are other factors in play that were affecting, and this was starting way back, and also the food supply and the fat type and the animals that we were hunting changed. It's far more complicated. And so, so I don't want to spoil it, but no, it's not a danger. Believe me, it is not a danger. But people with an ApoE allele it's more the ancestral type, are far more sensitive to carbohydrate. They have far more issues with carbohydrate metabolism. So they do far worse. They also cause far more dysregulation to themselves. So if you're an ApoE4, you should basically go zero carb. I don't care who you are. Carbs are really not your friend if you're an ApoE4, where others have far more robustness in terms of the mix in their macros. But ApoE4s are far more vulnerable to diseases that are driven by insulin resistance and stuff like that. So, it's a complex story which combines insulin resistance, mitochondrial function, and all sorts of things. It's a far more complicated than just the sort of simplistic sort of way some people describe it or focus on it. So you will have to wait, mate, and you're welcome. So, because I don't, because people then, if I say it now, people then know where to research, and then they'll use that. And it's, I've done all the work, so I should get some bloody benefit out of it. It is important to balance K2 with vitamin. Yep, it is. MK4 has to be MK4. That's the animal form. That's the one that gets sucked into our cells. That's the one that gets utilized by our body. And it also has a hormone-like effect like vitamin D. And it's involved in all sorts of, even in your bile synthesis. MK4 plays a role in that. Not MK7, the natto one that plays no role. Now, there are people that can actually convert MK7 to MK4, but there is also, it's a bit like, beta carotene. So when you think about MK, that's actually a good analogy. Should have thought about this earlier. Fucking hell, where's my thinking cap when you need it? When you think about vitamin K2, think in terms of vitamin A, like beta carotene and retinol. Think about the beta carotene is the K7, and the retinol is the MK4. So that's how you should think about it. Now, there's about, I think, 32% of most populations, and sometimes in some populations even higher, they cannot convert MK7 to MK4. So if you're supplementing MK7, not going to really work for you, is it? So, MK4 is the animal form. That's what you should be getting. In most animal foods, it's primarily MK4. Brie is 100% MK4. Liver, 100% MK4. Eggs and all these things, so they're all 100% MK4. And even the ones that may have some of the, even milk, MK4. It does have some other menaquinones, like I believe milk has MK5 as well, but MK5 can convert very easily to MK4. So, but MK7 has inhibition. This is what stays in the bloodstream. And people say, oh, how fantastic. MK7 stays in the bloodstream for ages. Yeah, because it can't be fucking converted. That's why. And you've got Thomas DeLauer and a whole lot of other people out there saying how fantastic, Dr. Berg and all that. I mean, they put some good stuff out, don't get me wrong. But they also say some absolute shit when it comes to, vitamin K2. When you've got these SNPs, these genetic SNPs that are not converting properly, why are you recommending stuff to people that is going to say? And the thing is, we don't really know because there's no studies with all this resonant. We know that, for instance, like beta carotene, if you can't convert it, you actually get like a yellowy type skin, and it seems to cause some oxidative stress in that regard. Does MK7, if it accumulates in the body and doesn't get converted, does that create oxidative stress? There are no studies. That's just idle speculation on my side, and I'll be honest. But, that's a possibility. So would you take the risk? Fuck, I wouldn't. Honestly, I would not take the risk. So keep away from that shit completely. Thanks, mate. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there about a lot of things. And that's why, I've looked into these things deliberately to try and look at the science and look at what actually is happening. And as I said, sometimes you guys ask me things and I go, well, look, not sure about that. It's like people, I can't remember who asked me about that malaria drug. Now, I have used it because I actually had, this was years ago, I was in Southeast Asia. When was it, 2007 or 2008? Anyway, I either had malaria or dengue fever. I was in Java, so I couldn't actually, trying to get, had the doctor there trying to tell me, oh, you either got dengue or you got malaria. That was what came through on the translation. Luckily, I had malaria tablets, those sort of malaria tablets with me, and I actually took them, and they did help in that regard. But they are toxic. You can't take them for a very long period of time. So if anybody can get their hands on those, I would not be preloading. God, no. If you get, for instance, the problem, then use them. So you could go to the doctor, say, probably a bit hard now to say that I'm going to fly out to Southeast Asia. I need malaria tablets. He's going to look at me and say, you want them for coronavirus, don't you? No, you don't have it. You just won't give me a prescription, which is really hard to get them. So you can probably get them online, but I would not use them unless I came down with symptoms, because they have been used in China and they were used also in SARS. And SARS and MERS were far worse than what corona is, this COVID-19. So SARS, for instance, was something like 2.5 times or something worse, and that's from memory, and it was like, what was it, 34? God, I'm trying to remember now. Give me a sec. It was 34 divided by 3.4. Oh, no, not 3.2. God almighty. 3.2. Oh, it was 34.2. Fuck's sake. 1.28. It was 28. 3.28. So it's about 10.54 times MERSA. That was the one that was in the Middle East, and that was really nasty. That sort of had, Ebola is about 40, so it was just slightly below Ebola in the sort of how it spreads lethally through the population and kills in a very lethal way. That's another reason why it didn't spread as far. SARS was, what was it, 9.60, what about 3.28, which was about 3 times, 2.92 or 93, about 3 times worse in sort of contagiousness and also lethality compared to the current one. This is another reason why it didn't spread, because if you kill the host too quickly, it's much harder to spread. This one wasn't as contagious or wasn't as lethal. It was a much, a new corona strain that was a bit less severe. And that's why it's been able to remain in people for longer. And as a consequence, being able to be less, harder to pick up. As a consequence, it spread much quicker. It's like the flu, it's very hard to pick up until you get it nearly. So it sort of really is under the radar, so to speak. in that regard, because it's 1.28, where this current one is 3.28. So that's the sort of difference in how, and that's another reason why a bit of the lockdown and all that sort of stuff. But, it's overkill. As I said, they could have just isolated the most vulnerable people and older people, and basically allowed just herd immunity to happen in the rest of the population. And a few people got a bit sick, the medical system could have coped without basically destroying the economy. Again, politicians who have no idea what they're doing, which is always a problem and a worry. And then people that have got vested interests to push certain agendas, and use it as an opportunity. How much? I don't know. We can speculate a lot, but hard to say. Why is there no cure for the common cold? Because basically it's one of the most difficult ones to deal with. It mutates so easily. And it used to be far more lethal in the past, but it's basically become less lethal. That's why it actually can spread very rapidly through the population. Still kills a lot of people, don't get me wrong, that are vulnerable. Like the current one is basically affecting people in the same way, but it's just basically the current one that can spread faster and can basically get into the vulnerable populations and affect them far more, compromise their immune systems even further. And that's the difference between the two. But in terms of cure, there's been no incentive, in a sense. There's actually more money made in actually mitigating. Just think about all the actual medications that are out there, the antivirals, your day and night flu tablets, and and a whole lot of other medications that come through in that regard. So, remember in the past, governments used to do a lot of the R&D. Now it's all the pharmaceutical companies. And it's only when we get these sort of pandemics that governments jump in and actually give money to these corporations and tell them to instruct them to basically develop these things. And that's why, it's always, a mad rush. But common cold, like a lot of things, if they were properly combated, we got rid of the yellow fever and all sorts of things. So it's not as if we can't, but you need investment in money. After the 70s, after Reaganomics and Thatcherism, most of that sort of government money that went to R&D, basic R&D, got pushed out to universities and to private sponsors. And so as a consequence, the greater good, the government used to invest in some of those things. They're not, there's a lot of things you can say about them, but at the same time, there were, in the past, if you think about it, especially the sort of the people that came out of the 50s and 60s had that sort of the importance of being statesmen and nation builders after the Second World War, and interested in building communities and stuff like that. They were more focused, and that's why they were popular amongst the people, because they did give a shit far more than today's pollies. So there's, there are reasons, there are political reasons, there are money-related issues why we haven't. It's not that we have brilliant science. We have CRISPR. We can cut and dice, slice and dice genetic code. We have, production systems that can actually produce massive amounts of drugs in, in a couple of hours, where before it would take weeks to, produce the same equivalent product. So it's not as if we don't have technology and all that, but if you don't do the basic R&D, you're not going to basically work out the exact genomics of the actual virus or the common cold, as an example, and then work a way of actually, combating it. But that would take a lot of billions of dollars. And private companies won't do that because there's no money in it. If I give you a cure and you cure and it's go away, that means once everybody's cured, the product, you can't sell it. Who are you going to sell it to? Martians? So this is where basic R&D needs to be done by the state in these sort of areas, because the private sector won't do it because there's no money in it. It's all comes down to money. This is where, Reagan and Thatcher got it wrong. They did not understand that certain things need to be done by the public. like the military. I mean, you're not going to privatize the military. It'd be a mess. You'd end up with mercenary armies going and doing all sorts of atrocious things. So, because when you allow it to, let me put it this way. Somebody described the market. Even though it's good at determining price to some extent, there is, let's say, they do get it wrong, but we're talking about in general terms now, theoretical. But at the same time, when it comes to basically behavior, they're like psychopaths. If you don't regulate, they'll just kill everyone in the society. So, for profit, they'll just kill their mothers even. So you have to have some sort of semblance of a state that does anything. Otherwise, you end up with, like some of those warlord structures in Africa where, you've got a couple in the top, they run everything, they got it, and everything else below is nothing, So without a state, you can't basically have schools, hospitals, all these sort of things. Even for their own interest, modern capitalism can't function. I mean, if they don't have a state to back their interests with a military, do you know what I mean? So, in that regard, so it's, that they scream, and these elites scream and shout and all that because they don't want to pay for anything, but they get all the benefits, out of by corrupting the political system. Pisses you off. But that's what's happened since that era, especially since the 70s, where we went from, a much a ruling class that wasn't as, they didn't have as much of GDP, to a ruling class now that has so much of GDP that basically they're turning the entire society into a rentier society where the rest of us have got nothing and have to rent from them, and it's, starting to look like a sort of a feudal capitalism. And that's where we need antitrust laws to break them up. And it's about time that happens, because these are the consequences of when you've got that sort of level of corruption at the political and economic level. I wouldn't actually say that I'm in a vulnerable group. I used to be when I had a pre-existing heart condition, but since then, I mean, my last check with my cardiologist showed that blood perfusion when they scanned my heart was really good, and I had regression. So I'm in a much better position now, and on an animal-based diet and all that. I mean, I used to back then get colds and sick throughout the whole year multiple times. I had some of the highest levels of sick leave in at one period of time, So, now I've got one of the lowest. I'm one of the model employees in a sense. So a complete reversal. And I put it down to the diet, that I got my health back in a massive way. So I am less vulnerable. Obviously, I'm in my mid-50s. I'm 54 this year. So I'm in a far more vulnerable sort of position in that regard, But at the end of the day, I think that nutrition, I mean, there's a lady that, how old was she? 103. She got the coronavirus and survived, but she had good nutrition. To get to 103, you have to have good nutrition. It's like that other lady, the French lady that got to 122 and used to eat 3 eggs a day and a whole lot of other animal products, So, you got good nutrition, you got healthy bones, you got a healthy, heart and lungs and stuff like that. You should be able to survive. I mean, I'm more vulnerable in another regard, which most people don't know. My great-grandfather died at 107 from pneumonia. My grandfather died at 87 from pneumonia, and his brother died at 89 from pneumonia. So we have that susceptibility to pneumonia. So my old man's 85, still alive and kicking. It doesn't take any drugs or whatsoever, doesn't have any ailments like my grandparents and all that. I just basically did a species inappropriate diet full of pizza, sweets, Coca-Cola, alcohol, tobacco, and everything else under the sun for a very long time, like most of the people. But, I was junk food junkie. And, I'm 20 kilos heavier than I am today and very unhealthy. And so big pot belly out here and, oh, God. And so as a consequence, I ended up with cardiovascular disease, especially because of a whole lot of the seed oils. That was the big one because I cooked everything. I believed the seed oils are really healthy for you. And saturated fats were really a poison. So, I fell for that propaganda like most people. But, I sort of thought, and I knew about Atkins way earlier than most people on the, before even YouTube was created, back in my 30s. A mate of mine, the person who's my best mate still, told me about Atkins because he had tried Atkins and I told him he was an idiot. I was the idiot back then. And so, yeah, so hi, mate. The reality is that, I did myself a big disservice as a consequence. But, it's just the way it is with anything. One thing that I've learned, you don't look back, look forward. I don't think I'm that vulnerable anymore. So keep my nutrition up. I keep my vitamin D status good. That's my focus, especially now going into winter. I will be supplementing. Normally don't, but I will be. And I can't get away to Southeast Asia to get a bit of sun, which is unfortunate. So I can't beef up in the middle of winter my vitamin D levels. So, yeah, I'm sort of hamstrung. So I have to supplement. But, obviously I will refrain from my, my ice cream to some extent. I just have to lower my, my Saturday. Like tonight, normally I would be at a mate's place having ice cream, and I've abstained for tonight, and I will be abstaining next week as well. So yeah, look, I need because once you take certain supplements, you're adding more deuterium, and so I need to, I can't afford to, because there's some sugar, some refinement in most commercial ice creams. So I have to put those aside through this period. It's just, have to wait until Corona goes away before I can a bit indulge here and there. It's just the way it goes. My grandmother is pregnant. Any advice? You're fucking kidding me. Well, she comes from a good stock of people. She probably knows more about it than me. I would say she if for her to get pregnant at that age, she must have good nutrition. So I suspect she knows a hell of a lot better how to look after herself than I did a few years back. So she's probably doing the right thing if she's getting pregnant at 87. Now, I know that some, African women do breastfeed their grandmothers, do breastfeed their kids because they have a high animal diet. And so they maintain very good, capacity to support, but it's pretty unheard of at that age, so she hasn't gone menopausal at all, so, oh, you're kidding. You scoundrel, God, I was going to say, I know, but it does, as far as their grandmothers in Africa, yes, they do breastfeed kids. So they still have milk in older age. You can actually see it go on YouTube it and check it. But yes, what a scoundrel. I'm going to say, bloody hell. I've never heard of that before. I wasn't going to doubt you, it just shows how gullible I am. Yeah, hook, line, and sinker. Look, exercise is important, but it's the type of exercise. So, it's very important the type of exercise that you do. Yeah, touche. You got me, scoundrel. But it's really important to focus on, building muscle. That's the most important thing. Cardiovascular health, like interval cardio, high intensity, that's good. It doesn't, you don't want the long duration. That long duration type thing is unhealthy for the heart. So that's why you don't get centenarians who are long distance runners that do that constant It's usually people like, I've looked at, what was the other guy, 90, he's a British bodybuilder. He was still competing in his 90s, so, but he wasn't taking any drugs or anything like that. He was doing it the old way, the traditional way. So, I would say muscles are more important. Muscles keep your metabolic rate up. They keep your insulin more insulin sensitive because you've got better glucose control and better clearance. So yes, muscle is more important than endurance in that regard. So, that's where you need to focus, I would say. Weights. My father, same thing, 85, strong as an ox, so he does weights and eats plenty of meat, and he's very healthy and strong. So, and some of his ailments have sort of gone away that he had, some sarcopenia and other issues like that have gone by the wayside. So, yeah. So I think he's an example to us all. And that's what I strive to become, like my father at 85, where I can still lift weights and basically eat plenty of meat and be strong and robust. That's most important, So I'm about to go. Nice brisk walk in the sunshine now, Harry. Good for you, Bo. That sounds pretty good. Have to make the most of it. I would as well. Thanks again, and have a good night. You too. Thanks. Appreciate it. Enjoy your walk in the sun. Very important for us that, sunlight. And the other thing is for your mitochondria, when the sun comes up in the morning, if you can get out there in the sun, that's, one of the most important. Get out there, get that early sun. And when the sun's going down at night, get out there and get that red, infrared, near infrared type, really good for your mitochondria. It really sets up your, and then get your blue blocking glasses on for your melatonin, to be able to sleep really well at night. Really important, guys. You start doing that, you'll realize a lot of benefits in the long run. What's a scoundrel asking me now? Should I trust what he's actually asking me? Do opioids disrupt the gut? To be honest, I do know that I don't know enough about the gut in terms of opioids. I avoid them like the plague. And I avoid them for a different reason. And my reason is that, when it comes to medication, it really depends on what other parts are in there. So it's really hard. There are some medications, the same type of medication, that may have an emulsifier that can be harmful to the gut, and another medication that doesn't. And it could be doing exactly the same thing from a different manufacturer. So it depends on the other stuff as well. So, I couldn't give you a generic answer. Where opioids can be a problem is causing other dysregulation in the body. And that's where you really have to concern yourself. In terms of gut permeability, never seen any signs to show opioids having an effect on gut permeability. It's lectins, it's, like the gluten, which is a lectin, it's these things that are basically driving, it's not an emulsifiers again, they're driving this gut permeability issue. I've never heard of opioids having any disruptive effect. They usually have a disruptive effect to your, your brain chemistry. That's where it's primarily from, or neurotoxic effects. Those are sort of the things that I know in terms of opioids. Then, when you're looking at painkillers and stuff like that, and if you've got like a fever, which is combating an infection, the last thing you want to be taking is a painkiller or an opioid, unless you've got extremely high fever, which can be dangerous to the brain. And that's when you may want to temper it down with a low dose to bring it down. So you've still got a fever that can kill off, those pathogens in your body, because that's the whole purpose of raising the temperature, to kill off things. It's And even high temperatures less of a problem for adults, and more a problem for young kids. And you've got to be careful with the dosing there, how you do it in that regard. You're welcome, mate. Good point. Thanks. I'll research the manufacturer. I'm on it for arthritis and connective tissue damage. Okay. So look, in terms of arthritis, sulfur plays a big role. So keep that in mind in that regard. The other thing that you should consider is proteolytic enzymes. I'm trying to think now. There's a couple of brands. I can't remember the exact. It's one that I recommended ages ago, but I can't remember the damn name. It's not coming. Look, if it comes to me, I'll post it on this at the end. Maybe tomorrow when my brain's sort of come back to earth, and I'll actually post a link to proteolytic enzymes. Now, they're really good because basically our enzymes actually decline with age, and they play a big role. This is all that stress and all that oxidation, all the damage we've done to our body. We've reduced the capacity for our body to heal itself, to transcript things. Our DNA is damaged. Our mitochondria are damaged or compromised, or we've lost a lot of DNA. Density in our body, so we can't do things, we can't repair things. These are a lot of different factors that are at play in that regard. But proteolytic enzymes are really important in clearing out. They clear out junk. So you're actually giving your body things that it doesn't have to transcript to create itself, these little machines, these little nano, and you're actually giving the body, and it can actually utilize that with less energy required to basically start healing different parts. The other thing you should consider is also stem cell therapy. I know that Bart's got, there's a, what is it called? There's a thing that's like a precursor to stem cells, some sort of nutraceutical. I forget the name. Go and check Bart K's site. He actually is sort of connected with this company. He used it to repair his eyesight. So if that's your main ailment, remember the problem is the targeting. This doesn't actually. So if, let's say you've got a bad heart and a bad knee, it will focus on the heart because the heart's more important. If you've got bad eyesight and a bad heart, it'll again focus on the heart and allow you to go blind, because that's not important. You can survive. So it's what you can survive is more important. So if you've got any underlying, you may need to take it over a longer period of time to repair certain parts, and then it will repair that part. So it's sort of an untargeted, goes in there, and where the body uses it. It depends on where the priorities are in terms of healing. So it's one of those untargeted things, but it does accelerate healing. So if it does, it could basically help with dealing with that connective tissue and arthritis in a more effective way. So consider that in that regard. Yep, I agree with the Kraft test. The theories on CVD being diabetes in situ, well, sort of. There are more drivers. Cardiovascular disease is not only driven by, hyperinsulinemia, but also by, there's a number of pathways. I mean, there's also pretty much lipid peroxidation is the one that the key driver, and lipid peroxidation is coming from PUFA that's been oxidized, seed oils. That's the biggest driver. That is actually what is causing the majority of cardiovascular disease. What basically, when you add high sugar to that diet and drive, this sort of the desulfonation of the glycocalyx, that's the other side of things. So it's a two-pronged thing. So you've got high levels of sugar coming into the bloodstream with a positive charge. You're also got a lot of foods which are basically stripping away sulfur. You're reducing the sulfur with oxalate that's coming through the foods that you're eating, the plant foods. So you're reducing the amount of sulfonation, which undermines the integrity of the glycocalyx, those little hairline structures in the endothelial cells that sit on top of your endothelial layer, which is quite thin. And so what happens is this sort of effect, that stickiness that sits there, sort of ends up allowing, and then you've got the it sticks on the lipoproteins, damaging their surface, potentially damaging their receptors, so leaves them in circulation to oxidize even further. And so then as they oxidize, because they're oxidizing from outside and inside with the PUFA, the esterified cholesterol, which is basically this waxy material, which is cholesterol, combined to 3 fatty acids from PUFA, from the vegetable oils, always the vegetable oils. That's what they find. That's where the mechanistic studies showed lipid peroxidation coming from PUFA. Saturated fat cannot oxidize. You literally have to cook it at very high temperatures, really put it under to actually break those bonds. Those double bonds only oxygen will actually, without vitamin E to be an electron donor. That's why in animal foods, all PUFA is attached to vitamin E. So it actually is an electron donor to prevent oxidation of the PUFA. It stabilizes them. And in fish, for omega-3s, because there are 3 double bonds, there you've got astaxanthin, which I've mentioned before, that red stuff that is around the fish. That is also an electron donor, a much bigger electron donor, because omega-3s are even more vulnerable. This is what I wouldn't supplement with omega-3s. Eat fish, for fuck's sake, And, that sort of stuff ends up, affecting the integrity. So PUFA for omega-3s or omega-6s can oxidize, and they can actually have a deleterious effect on the lipoproteins and can cause damage, structural damage and oxidation byproducts. Then you've got sugar on top that actually damages them as well, plus affecting the stickiness on the glycocalyx because it's stripping away the sulfur, reducing the negative electric charge. And so things, rather than repelling, so lipoproteins coming through rather than actually negative, the pericellular matrix, sulfonated, negative charge, stick, too much sugar, less integrity, less electrical charge, negative charge, collapse for 6 hours by sugar. You hit the actual endothelial cell. What are you going to cause? Massive freaking inflammation, and at that point. So there you've just created, by those 2 foods, that massive inflammation. So it's a combination. Insulin resistance also causes high blood pressure. So you're actually the shearing force is increased as well. So even causing these lipid streaks from the shearing force, from the higher blood pressure, created by insulin, that is being pushed up. But, so it's a very complex effect of a number of things. But, Kraft's theory is part of this story. And usually people that are basically, inducing the Randall cycle and pushing, these high, excessive amounts of refined sugar and refined fats from seed oils is what is actually driving this whole, situation, this whole disease profile. But Kraft was right, it's a component of CVD, diabetes in situ, but it's not the only thing that's driving it. There are a number of these other factors in combination that are driving this, and through other pathways as well, like insulin resistance, due to the Randall cycle at the cell, and, it's this combination. This is why when you fast, the cell can actually start reducing the energy that it's actually stored. Sugar and fats that are in the cell can actually start being utilized. And then the threshold drops and the receptors come to the surface to pull in more nutrients because they need them. So fasting can actually make you more insulin sensitive, especially a 3-day fast. I just did a 3.5-day fast, but that was to recycle my immune system, so I could actually basically have a stronger immune system for the current virus. So yeah, I did say that I was going to do it, and I did it. I was like pushing for 4 hours, and then 4 days, and then I went, oh fuck it, I've had enough. I started, once I started feeling a bit hungry, I go, nah, I'm not going to stress myself. I'm just going to have something, and I did, and I broke my fast. So with a glass of milk, really nice. That was enjoyable. So yes, and then later on I had a nice. That was the other part of the roast, which I'd taken to work. So I had half and half. So I left half at home. So I had today, which I warmed up, and the other half I had it after my long fast. But I didn't have it immediately. You can't, you want. So basically what I had was I had some gelatin, put it in the actual milk, stirred it. It's a bit, rough on the top, so it was crunchy. But anyway, so I took a bit of that glycine in and stuff like that, so that helps with the healing of the gut lining, so the rebuilding, the milk and all that. So I sort of had that. Then I had a bit of brie after that. And then I had later in the afternoon, I had basically the meat, so, I sort of didn't immediately, you don't want to break your fast, you want to. The problem is I'd run out of bone broth, and I just couldn't be fucked basically preparing any bone broth, and that was the only reason why I went for those options. So usually I use bone broth, but shit happens. I enjoy the milk more. So yes, it is a component part, and I would say that somebody that has high insulin resistance is going to have damage to, they're going to be pushing advanced glycation end products through their body, and it will take longer through through that pathway to create cardiovascular disease, but it will eventually produce it, and cancer and other things like that, maladies. But seed oils will drive it much faster, and seed oils will drive cancer much faster. And the reality is that you only have to look at the historical evidence, where before we even were high on sugar, seed oils were driving both cancer rates up through the 50s, 60s, and 70s before we went on steroids with sugar, and they were also driving cardiovascular disease. From the moment seed oils were introduced through the Great Depression, especially because they were cheap and people were poor, and they gave up on animal foods because they were more expensive. And it's a bit like now, people are going on junk food 2.0 and poor quality animal replacement products, which is what the Beyond Burger and all this sort of stuff. It's more profitable for the companies. They can make it cheaper. That's what they're trying to do, and people are going to get, this is the next stage of destroying our health. That's going to happen, unfortunately. Yes. So, yeah, it's not looking good. I've been making lunch for my mum, 93 beef, eggs, liver, and have to take lunch to her now. You do that, that's fine. Listen to the rest later, not a problem, Tara. You do what you need to do for your family. And I'm glad that you're actually feeding your mother that sort of food. Yeah, my dad basically eats eggs, liver, and beef. He's 85 and he's in good nick. So yeah, that's nutrient density. At that age, you need more. You actually need more at that age. Believe me, guys, you do need more, because you have greater nutrient requirements in older age. If you want to prevent decline, you better get on what Tero's mother's doing. Did I hear the Bart video about hysteresis with Nick Patterson? I actually did. I found it very interesting. I do disagree with him on metformin. I think it's got too many side effects. It inhibits gluconeogenesis, which is a problem in itself. And I think that's a factor for basically dysregulated sugars in your body. So I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a good transitional tool, because I actually encouraged my brother-in-law to use, who's a diabetic, to use metformin, but it should be only used for a short amount of time to transition somebody to an appropriate diet, to a low carb diet, and then eventually to a keto type carnivore diet, away from sugar altogether. And then you need gluconeogenesis, otherwise you cannot do it. And you do not need metformin, because metformin also decreases, has an effect on B1. It also, what else does that have? It affects a number of things, and actually I can't remember the whole list now. It basically causes a lot of deficiencies in a lot of things, both minerals and vitamins. So it's not a good idea. Now, if we exclude that, now in terms of his hysteresis idea, I think that prolonged, sort of really bad health and all that, that your, insulin levels don't come back to a certain lower level and all that, I'm not convinced, to be honest. I think that there may be something that where certain people may be very damaged, but even he couldn't provide real evidence. He couldn't evidence that whole idea sufficiently for me, But my sort of idea is that if you do long fasts with health be supervised, you have to be supervised for these long fasts. You just can't do it yourself. You need to be tested to make sure that things are fine in your body. So it's you need to find a good practitioner that will help you in that regard. But I believe that you can reverse a lot of this really sort of chronic, sort of low grade insulin resistance that people are finding very hard to get rid of. So I think ultimately fasting is the best tool in that regard. Low carb, keto, carnivore diet. So I think actually the keto, a lower protein component, not very low. I don't believe in low protein, at the same time. I believe in, rather than, the typical carnivore, which is 30 to 40%, drop back to about 20 to 20% in that regard, and try and push the fat level up to 80, and basically when you're eating and then fasting for more of the time. I mean, I consume about 30 to 35% of my calories from protein, but in this sort of situation, I think that you really need to lower it to that threshold to basically help push things in the right direction, and with also prolonged fast periods to fix that regulatory system. The other thing is you may need to check to find out what your pancreas status is. Is your pancreas harmed? Is your liver harmed? So you need to really know exactly what the state of your liver and your pancreas is. Another important factor that people seem to forget as well is zinc. So, are you getting enough zinc? What are you eating? I mean, obviously, it's important to consider, I would say, you'd have to do a craft test for that. That would be important. So, and most doctors won't do a craft test. Most doctors don't even know how to do a craft test. But that would be a very important way of actually finding out. I mean, I agree completely with Ivor Cummings. Craft test is one of the best you can do. So that would be my idea, to get an idea where you're at. But yeah, I'm concerned that sometimes people have issues and then they try to make a little theory around the sort of issues. I'm a bit more flexible when it comes to science. So I'm an empiricist and a materialist. And so my focus, even though I'm religious, I'm still, I find ways to reconcile the two in my own head. And that's most important for me. What exists outside space-time may be different than what exists within the material space-time. So that's how I conceptualize it in my own mind, and I'm comfortable with that. But in terms of, for me, the science, what's the evidence? I'm very skeptical. As an empiricist, it's my nature to be skeptical. Show me the data, show me the science, show me exactly the pathways that actually create this pathology, and show me that basically fasting or other strategies don't work. I haven't seen, and nothing was discussed in those terms of other strategies and other approaches. So, maybe he's right. I'm not saying that he's wrong. There's a difference between, as a scientist, thinking scientifically, I can't say he's wrong, but neither can I say he's right, because there's not sufficient information and science to prove it either way. But I think that if you basically, look at, let's say you've got a liver problem, or you've got basically a pancreatic problem, you've lost too many beta cells, or, you've got some problem, some other dysfunction, some glucagon dysregulation or whatever. So, there are ways of actually repairing that. I usually say to people, there's not only stem cells, there's allopoic acid. Allopoic acid is one of the best ways for healing a lot of dysfunctional organs. And so I would say to people, why don't you try high dose of allopoic acid? I mean, obviously you could consume eggs and liver and those sort of things that have got allopoic acid, animal products. But the problem is, you, in order to heal, in some cases, you're forced into supplementing, high doses of these. I did it before myself with my cardiovascular. So, allopoic acid would be one thing that I would use to repair and heal. And then after doing that for a year, then I would actually look, it may actually just fix this insulin sensitivity and resistance. So it may be that, those organs weren't functioning as well. So it's hard to say. I'm not into theorizing without enough evidence to back something either way. Yep. Yeah. No, I've never had my insulin levels checked. I mean, when I basically have, like fasting, I don't know whether fasting sort of, blood glucose at 3.7 millimoles, or 4 point something millimoles, which is basically at base level. Why would I bother? Why would I bother paying a whole lot of money? Because it is expensive, these things. Doing a craft test in particular, doing a proper thing, is quite an expensive proposition. Hand me the money and I'll go and do it. But I wouldn't basically do it myself unless you really had an underlying problem like Nick has. I think he should do a craft test and try and work out where he's at accurately. And I don't know whether he has done some of this stuff. He sort of spoke around the edges about some other tests and stuff like that, but didn't really get into whether he had done a proper craft test. So I don't know. I think he did another video with Pim, but I haven't seen that one. So I can't really tell you. There may have been more information in that. So if you know that he's done a craft test or whatever, can you put it on there? Just let me know, because I'm not sure. And I don't want to just idly speculate if, because I don't really know. But yeah, I'm not convinced with the theory. Let's put it that way. I've myself, who was quite sick, was able to basically become insulin sensitive. So, and other people that I know have also. So I don't know. I find it hard. I think sometimes people are impatient. It takes some time. When you've damaged yourself over 22 decades or more, what do you expect? 1 or 2 months to basically heal? It can take a couple of years like it did for me. So it takes a while to come back, to heal, to repair things. I'm still in that process of getting better and better every day. So yeah, I'm not really convinced in that regard. I think sometimes it's a question of time rather than basically us theorizing that it's making up another ailment or another disease which doesn't exist. So I'm a bit concerned about creating things that then people sort of either capitalize on or run us, because there's a lot of, we've had things in the past. These people that have come up with sort of vitamin supplements or antioxidant things or all sorts of things, and they've gone down this crazy pathways, flag waving their stuff, and I'm going, well, fucking hell, they didn't have factories back 10,000 years ago producing this shit. What do we need it? So, this is where I sort of have an issue with that sort of stuff. To be thinking, helmet, good for. Okay, I'm type 2, but get my blood glucose in the low 3s when fasting. Okay, so you're a type 2 diabetic, and when you're fasting, your blood glucose levels drop quite a bit in that regard when you're fasting. So if you're getting in those low levels, your insulin is working fine, because basically if your blood glucose was still high when you're fasting, then you may have some pancreatic issues. But if your insulin is responding and keeping it, relatively low, unless, is it in the low 3s? You say, low 3s. Is it always in the low 3s? Just put down whether it's always in the low 3s or whether it jumps up into the 4s. Does it ever jump into the 4s? Can you just put it down now? Because there could be a glucagon dysregulation. Just let me know if it jumps up into the 4s ever, or if it's constantly down in the low 3s. Seedman. I'll come back to you until you actually type that. Has anyone else heard this? Chinese doctors have noticed the sickest had the lowest LDL. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've heard of that as well. Yep, they did. That's in most countries you will notice people with the lowest LDL. It's even the Framingham study. That's a 30-year observational study, epidemiological observational study. Now, it's not a food frequency questionnaire. What did you eat? This sort of nonsense. It's just basically an observational study. So it goes into the 4s, not a problem. If it didn't go into the problem, then you probably have some pancreatic dysregulation. But if it goes into the 4s, nah, that's just basically, even mine sometimes goes into the, I'm like down to 3.7, then comes into the mid 4s. So not an issue. So pretty much, I would not. I'll come back. I'll come back to you in a sec. Yes, and even the Framingham study showed on all-cause mortality, which is the most important, because all the other stuff where they talk about CVD, 1 or 2 extra people or stuff like that, that's bullshit. That's made up statistics by the pharmaceutical companies because they're selling statins. And so they go, there's one person that survived in a couple of thousand or whatever. Whoopity-doo, what a wank. That's so they can just keep on selling their poison, their mitochondrial poison. But the Framingham study showed, which is a clear observation, we're not looking at what they ate, just whether they had high LDL, low LDL. People that had the lowest LDL after 30 years, 73% were still alive. The people that had the highest LDL, hyper levels, hypercholesterolemia, as it's called, around, I can't remember whether it's 92 or 93% was still alive. So in the above 90% was still alive. More than something like 20% in terms of, or 20 years difference between the two groups. 20% difference between the two groups. Out of 100, if you want to use 100 as the age bracket, or 20 years difference, whatever you want to use as a marker, doesn't make any difference. But substantially 2 decades. So yeah. So that tells you everything about how important LDL is. It's a precursor for vitamin D. You want to be healthy and not actually suffer, respiratory infections and die. You need vitamin D. What does vitamin D do? Need cholesterol. You can take all the supplementation in the world of vitamin D. You can sit out in the sun like the vegetards as long as you like. But if you're not consuming and getting enough vitamin cholesterol, go and take a wank. You'll be dead as a doornail when it hits, especially if you're in a vulnerable group. So yeah, I'm not surprised. What all cause mortality? Yeah, on basically all cause mortality. Vitamin D. Cholesterol is one of the most important things. That waxy material, that fatty waxy material, is one of the most important materials for life. It's existed through evolution for billions of years. Why should I disagree with nature? Only the ignorant white coats do. Yep. I realised that it was in regards to the current virus. That regard. Now back to Seidman. In regards to his blood glucose and all that. So since you said you're a type 2, and you seem, are you taking any medication? Are you taking insulin at all, or not? So if you're taking, yep, you're welcome, mate. So, Seedman, are you taking insulin? Because you're not giving me enough information. I mean, I can, I don't like speculating. I need to know, if you're not taking insulin, what other medication are you taking, and what sort of diet are you doing as well? I mean, otherwise I can't really. When you're not fasting, what are you consuming? So you're basically pure carnivore, no medications. Good. And basically, so when you're not fasting, do you get a spike in your levels? Is you getting a spike in your glucose levels? So one thing, are you getting a spike in your glucose levels? And the other thing is, when you were these sort of readings of fasting insulin, of fasting blood glucose, were they now that you're a carnivore, or were they before, when you were taking medication? I need to sort of get my head around. I'm not sure what you mean by no. Do you mean no, that your blood, you're not getting any high blood glucose readings nowadays, that you're on a carnivore diet? What I mean is, has the carnivore diet healed you of your big glucose spikes? just say, yes, it has healed me. So I know, so I'll put it up. Key. Hold on. I'll come back to you. What was that? No highs on Carney. Okay. So basically you were a type 2, and since you've been carnivore, you fixed your issues. Great. Fantastic. I'm happy for you. That's what hopefully that's what happens to most people. Now there are some people that are dysregulated and may have a pancreas issue or whatever, and you may need to heal that, with allopulic acid and a few other things in combination. So, NAD plus precursor, something like that. But since things have normalized, gone back to where they should be, I'm happy for you. Good on you. Good to hear. That's great news. Does anyone have ears for my dark conspiratorial 2 cents? Is it 19 seconds? I mean, this is a bat virus, but it's been mismanaged. But I think where the real conspiracy is, or not conspiracy, but I think some of the ruling elites are exploiting this to clamp down and control, put mechanisms in place. I'm concerned whether these mechanisms will be removed entirely, or whether some will remain as, we need these because we may have another crisis in the future and may need them again. That's where my concern is with some of this sort of stuff. Once you give power to someone, they don't like giving it away very easily. So yes, once they've had it, they've taken it on the easy. So that's where my biggest concern is, mate. In that regard, the other sort of stuff, are there dark forces within the ruling circles? Yes, there are. Always have been. I mean, historically. But the only difference is that they're not the majority in power at the moment. Sort of those elements. I mean, many people think that the current president is fantastic, and I'm going, do you realize who's behind him? Mirza. This guy is a financier. He financed his campaign. And not only that, he's the one that's actually involved in high frequency trading, sort of the parasitic type financier that's sitting off the side of the exchange at Wall Street, doing high frequency trading. Now that's the guy that financed the current leader. So I tell you, the ruling class sometimes put so-called lovers of the average person up there because, to get, they're always trying to trick us, give us a supporter of the masses, when really they're just basically looking after this guy. I mean, you only have to take a look at the guy that actually appointed as the sort of person responsible for the finances of the United States. He's the next guy from one of the big banks. I can't remember whether it's which one was it now. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the big banks. Wasn't Bank of America. It was I can't remember. So what's changed? One swamp rat left, and a new swamp rat turned up that basically acts as the people's swamp rat. So just changing the guard, nothing else. I better be careful because he's in power at the moment. They may take me away and put me in Guantanamo. God, self-censoring. That's how bad it's become. Then they talk about democracy. God, and criticize Iran and countries like that when we're, instituting similar things. Yes, the BS, it never ceases to amaze me, unfortunately, So, yes, greedy people that like getting everything for themselves. They've been doing it to us since the pharaohs. It's only the ancient Greeks, when they had direct democracy and put their aristocrats in their place, that basically let me Google it. Oops. Come on. That's the guy. Exactly. That's the guy there, Mr. High Frequency Trading himself. Computer scientist from Cambridge Analytica. Now he was actually involved in that. These people. God Almighty. He was in. That company. Cambridge Analytica. Remember that company? The big scandal. He's involved in that. He was involved. And he's got mates in that as well. I mean, they're up to their eyeballs. These people are so corrupt. Such, it's beyond the joke. They manipulate. They've literally created parasitic capitalism, a situation where they're basically manipulating. I can't compete against a computer for high frequency trading. And they literally just scam every single transaction. And they deliberately use high volume trading to push the market in one direction or another, so they can deliberately manipulate it to make money off the backs. And, it's us poor schmucks that get screwed in this whole game, Do that, Know your real enemies, not the false ones that they make out, That's they tell us all these other names, but in reality, some of these people, yes, they may have been past important in some period of time in history, but it's these sort of guys are the new power elites, the real new power elites behind the throne. So, as I said, know your real enemy. Don't get sidetracked. You do that. Let me know what you find. Yep. Anyway, guys, it's getting a bit late. I'm going to pull the pin because I have to save a bit of time, because my StreamYard, because I did the the other virus ones that I did, the 2 episodes, I've sort of cut quite a bit of my time, my free time in StreamYard. So I can't overuse tonight and tomorrow. I'm going to keep it to about 2.5 hours, sort of truncated. So I've got enough for the next weekend until my next monthly sort of rollover sort of thing. So I sort of, unfortunately, I would have liked to continue going, but I'm going to run out of minutes, so to speak. So thanks for being here today. I'll have to go back to my regular time slot since for Europe. I'll go into a later time slot so people are awake and people have got more time, and so I'll keep it to Sunday, which is sort of most people are at home and stuff like that. I get better results, more people that are watching, and more people that can actually have an opportunity to ask questions, because that's the whole purpose. The more of you guys that are on here, the more questions you can ask, and the more I can answer, and we can get a more diverse amount of questions and issues that people may be struggling with or need to look into or whatever. Thanks, man. I try, as much as possible. Actually, one of my best mates calls me H. Anyway, so and so in that regard, I'll go back to the next month where I'll be doing it the first Sunday of every month, which is for Europe. But I'll go back to the old slot, so it's later in the day in Australia, but it'll be like about close to now. It will be when the start point will happen, so there'll be more people awake and more people around within that. Yep, you're welcome, mate. Take care, all of yous. Keep your heads low. Try to keep under the radar as much as possible. We live in very uncertain times, unfortunately. Try to keep your family and yourself healthy as much as get the message out of the importance of vitamin D. Get the message out of the importance of getting away from seed oils and sugar. Particular seed oils, that's the real nasty one. That's the thing that people need to focus more on. Get them away from that junk. And also, tell them to eat bacon. Get more B3 in their diet. They need that D3, especially if they're in an environment high in EMFs. You need B3, more B3. You need to support NAD plus. Very important in your mitochondria. So you've got the energy. So you're not getting the energy zapped out of you, in a sense. Really important. That's where that effect is happening. It's not. There's no ionized radiation. There's no heat shock proteins, any stress issues of that sort. There's none of that. That's a side issue. That's all nonsense that people are talking about. And I don't know whether these conspiracies are deliberate, put out there by the industry, so people can so then they can say, well, look, the science doesn't support what they're saying. These guys are idiots. Don't listen to them. And they're more than justified. That's why I say you have to be careful what you jump on, which bandwagon you jump on. And these people have jumped there are a number of people, I won't mention names in the carnivore community, you guys know them, and others in the alternative, space, so to speak, that have jumped on this bandwagon. And they're wrong because the science is not there. And I've looked at it thoroughly, and good quality studies that are not in any way industry funded. So, I just do not accept that. But in terms of mitochondria, in terms of blue light, and in terms of these wavelengths having an effect on the mitochondria themselves, that's where the problem lies. And in particular, NAD plus, and water production within the mitochondria. And this is where the problem lies. And that's where we have to basically make dietary adjustments and reduce our exposure as well, which is important. I mean, me, I use basically Ethernet. Oops, can you see it? Oops, just trying to get it up there. Oops, it's not long enough. Ethernet cable, so, and that's what you need to, plug hardwired, turn your wireless off, and and basically if it's your own home, basically, because my router's right there, so because that's where they put it, so had an option. So if you can wire your home with Ethernet cabling, so you can actually have in all rooms a jack. Do it. Your body will love you for it. You need to lower your susceptibility to these sort of things, because there's going to be more. They'll be putting towels all over the place, and you're already moving at night through an environment full of blue light exposure. So if you're going out after 6, after the sun's gone down, blue blocking glasses, guys. Blue blocking glasses. Don't go out. Traffic lights and all that, they're all now all these LEDs, and that's just all blue light. You do not want that.
You want to be basically blue blocking, so you maintain your proper melatonin production and your proper circadian rhythms. You don't want those going out of whack, not getting proper sleep, not getting proper repair at night, and sleeping properly and waking up and feeling like absolute dog shit. So you need to protect yourselves, and the older you get, the more you need to do that, because you've got less robustness. It's just too much wear and tear from all these things. It's not only the poor diets, it's the environment, chemicals. There's a lot of things that are causing us damage. So take care, look after yourselves, and see yous in the not too distant future. Well, anybody that's still up tomorrow, I'll have another live stream now. What is that? And that's about 12, 14 and a half hours from now. There'll be my next live stream. So that's basically at 12 Eastern Standard Time, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So yes, so basically, 12 noon, go back. If anybody's still awake, it will be very early in the morning in most parts of Europe. But if you're still awake, come and ask a few questions. So there'll be a few from the North American crowd and from the Australasian crowd around asking me questions. So if anybody's, in Europe still up, look forward to hearing from you. Probably more from the eastern part, but it doesn't matter from where you are. I welcome all. I don't discriminate against anyone. We're a pretty much friendly crowd on this channel. Take care. See yous. Good night, good day, wherever you are, and we'll chat with some of you tomorrow or early next month. Take care. Bye.